Hello everybody, Klaire Fluffle here, and if there's two things that you need to know about me, no, this is not YouTube shilling, that's coming up soon, it's that I love Kirby and I love speedrunning. The two things just happen to fit together really well, like giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy what you're watching. I told you it was coming. Kirby games give you so many different ways to play the game, thanks to copy abilities, and while they are all an absolute delight, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We have a little too much fun on this channel, so let's go mean puppy mode and talk about what the worst copy ability is in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. The Wii version, anyway. Nothing against Deluxe, I'm just a lot more familiar with the original. But how the heck do we decide what the worst ability in the game is? Aren't Kirby games typically, easy, which means you can just zoom through with whatever ability you want? And to that I say, yes. You should just play with whatever ability you want, whether it's good taste or whether it's good or bad. This is just a fun little exercise, let's call it. In order to find out what truly is the worst copy ability ever, we're going to use the usual speed running metric. It's the only real objective metric to judge abilities by for this kind of game. The faster you go, the less likely you are inevitably to make mistakes, Okay, that's actually not entirely true, but for the sake of the pacing of the video, I'm gonna leave it at this. Any Joe Schmo ability can go through any Joe Schmo level, no Schmo problem. But if you apply a meaningful metric, like going fast, which in and of itself will inevitably make the game easier as you get better, you're actually gauging something meaningful. We all have our favorite abilities, but saying whip is better than wing because Kirby has a cowboy hat and goes yee-haw! And don't get me wrong, that is super epic, but it doesn't give us any meaningful conclusion. Speedrunning is also better than other less subjective measures, such as challenge runs, think something like a damageless playthrough, because the end result for speedrunning, time and ease of moving through the game, changes. For damageless, you just kind of do it damageless? Really, the only metrics that you're looking for there are difficulty, which is actually going to be different between everybody you talk to, and hey, what do you know? Speed! Anyways, whew, that was a mouthful. And don't you worry though, I'm not gonna look at any percent and just say, oh, not wing is the worst ability in the game, like and subscribe, and end the video there. Of course I'm gonna say like and subscribe, you know me, but the final answer we reach is gonna be far more interesting. Specifically, we're going to look at any percent, 100% single player, 100% two player or multiple controllers, true arena, and this nifty little series of speedruns that I've been doing myself for any percent ability solos. With all of those in mind, we are going to determine what the worst copy ability in the game is. And what are we gonna do with this information? I don't know. I'm not your mom. I'm not gonna tell you, no Kirby until you eat your vegetables. What I am telling you to do is consider checking out my Patreon in the description for some nifty perks, including 2-day early access to videos just like this one. But, more importantly, you get to be called a Puptrin! No way! I love being called a Puptrin. At least I imagine I would. I am the owner of the Patreon. I can't call myself a Puptrin. The biggest of wonderful thanks to my head-patting Fluffle fan Puptrins, Biohazard, Tyke, Jane, and remember, Miss K says, happy birthday, Jason! I love you guys! So, now the stage is finally set, right? We can actually begin finding out what the worst ability in the game is? Just about, but there is one more and admittedly painfully obvious point that I want to get out of the way first. The worst ability in the game is not wing. If you know anything about Return to Dreamland speedrunning, or you paid any kind of attention to this video, you'd know this was obvious. Wing is insanely good at basically everything, to the point where I'd argue even outside of speedrunning, this is just the best ability. It's got invincibility, it's strong, it's good versus bosses, it makes an absolute joke out of every level in the game, it all just works. Any percent in its entirety is basically wing, so by getting this out of the way early, we can get that out of the way too. I also figured to keep things more interesting, we'll exclude normal, crash, mic, and sleep. Keep it more fun and fair, balanced and stuff. We all know sleep is the true best ability in the game after all. That leaves, well, every other ability in the game. But before we can talk about the worst, we need to talk about some of the abilities that aren't. As in, these abilities are really, really good and some of the best in their own respective measurement, their own respective category, I guess. The abilities that aren't wing that we need to go through are Leaf, Whip, Water, Spear, Beam, Bomb, Cutter, Fighter, Fire, Hammer, High Jump, Ice, Needle, Ninja, Parasol, Spark, Stone, Sword, Tornado, Mennonite, Day-to-Day, and Bandanity. I promised I wouldn't just say that all of these are the worst, so I won't. The inner clown in me is going crazy right now, though! Anyway, a lot of these are movement-based abilities, so it's easy to assume that the more combat-focused ones would just be left in the dust. But that's exactly why we're factoring in the true arena. If you're good at fighting bosses, that's really important. Because of this, we can knock out, swing away the most infamous boss killer, Hammer, right off the bat. I don't have a third baseball joke, just to let you know. Sorry. We'll leave the true arena alone for a little while, though, and talk about both of the 100% categories first. Starting with 100% single player, or, again, one controller, this category stands out from every other Kirby speedrun ever, and how you basically see every single ability. It's really neat, super fun, and is actually one of my favorite speedruns of all time. We're not using personal bias for this as a measurement, because I said that before. If I'm gonna say that about you, same applies for me. It hurts, but I get it. That said, there are still some abilities that are better than others. Reality bites, dude. And the best ability in 100% is, surprisingly not wing, but fire. There's a lot of little factors as to why this is, but for the pacing of the video, all you need to know is that getting wing in any percent one time, very easy, while getting wing 100% multiple times throughout the game is a form of torture I wouldn't deign upon my worst enemy. This gives other abilities a lot more breathing room, and because fire has an excellent dash attack, is solid at killing bosses, can traverse vertically while not losing speed, and just in general being very solid at everything that it does, yeah, fire's not the worst ability in the game. It can't be. It's also really super good for a 100% two-player, but we'll get there when we get there. Alright, so now fire is safe too. Nifty. What other abilities are saved from the title of the worst thanks to this ever wonderful category? None of them are, actually. You see, despite the ability variety that makes me love this category as much as I do, it's also why none of the other abilities are saved. You see every ability, yeah, but most of them, you really only see like once. You don't even see fighter at all. I'd say almost every ability. Then you got stuff like bomb and whip that are only seen for challenge stage stuff. Abilities like spark and sword that are seen but really not seen all that much. And even more movement focused abilities like needle and ice, barely relevant. Yes, I know I just counted both needle and ice as movement abilities. I know. And while I could talk about abilities that see enough use, like a tornado, parasol, cutter, ninja, whatever, I think we should shift focus over to 100% two-player plus to see what's really impressive. First order of business here. Mennonite, Day-to-Day, and Bandanity, all safe. Nowhere near worst ability in the game. While I wouldn't call Day-to-Day or Bandanity among the best of the game, even if I would for Mennonite, but that's another story. They all have so much roll compression that it is impossible to argue them for the worst. Yes, I know, roll compression, legitimately a huge factor of Kirby speedrunning, really beyond Return to Dreamland, just in general, or your RPG heads can get out of here, because you really don't want to be changing your ability if you don't have to. And that takes time, and, well, sure, it also takes time spawning a friend. First of all, they're your friends. Second of all, you can keep them around without having to get rid of them, which means you don't have to worry about losing your ability. And also, if you need sword for something and you have fire, what would you rather do? Get rid of fire, take sword, and use this much worse ability? Or just use Mennonite? Duh! The same applies for the others. Why bother getting stone unless you're doing a single player run to pound stones. I know they're called stakes, but I wanted to make that joke, but I kind of lost confidence in the joke. I think I'm going to keep that take. This is your lesson. Keep your confidence, or else things are going to turn out bad. When you can pound it with Dedede instead. Why get Crash and watch a long animation, then cry about being bald and abilityless, when you can just use Bandana D instead? Why think when you can just zoom through levels with Meta Knight? Holy moly, he's so good. These three help all throughout the game and are so important to a multiplayer run that I consider them genuinely invaluable. Even though this is the only category that Bandana D is any good in. It's okay, I still love you. What's also nice about 100% 2P though, is that you see a fair amount of usage from other abilities too. But you only really see it for the necessary ones. Since those three friends, Meta Knight, Bandana D, Dedede, cover so much of the little stuff, you really get to see what matters most. And the shining stars of this category are, well, Wing and Fire, go figure, but they're not alone. High Jump, Parasol, and Tornado see a good amount of usage throughout the run. The Meta Knight may be good at moving up, but High Jump, it's literally in the name. Why am I explaining this? But in case, I don't know, you don't actually know what the word high means, you just think that I have weed and... Look at all the colors, dude. High Jump is easily the best ability in the game for moving upwards. There's a lot of moving up in this game. Even though Meta Knight and Wing are also good at it, and in certain areas, yeah, you don't have to get rid of them. For others, just use High Jump. Tornado, if you know anything about Kirby's Adventure, you know why Tornado is so good, but Return to Dreamland actually did a little bit of work to remove the end lag on Tornado, which is a huge deal. This isn't like Adventure, where as soon as you finish using it, you can just use it again and not think. Seriously, why did they make Tornado like that? But in this game, no, you actually got to think a little bit about what you're doing with it, unless you charge it fully, and then float cancel it, and then you can just use it again. It's still Tornado. It's really good. Believe it or not, though, no, this is not my personal bias talking. Parasol, I would actually argue, is the best ability in 100% 2-player after Wing, Fire. Honestly, like, Meta Knight's probably better, but Dedede and Bandana D, I don't know. I'd still say Parasol is better. It's got a really good dash attack. It is absurdly effective against bosses. It is the only ability worth literally anything underwater. It just does so much, and I love it so much, and it goes through the game so fast, and oh, I love it. Parasol is such a good ability. It's the colors and the dash attack and the doo-doo with the circus going. Oh, yeah, video. So Parasol is very good. Ninja and Cutter also see use, even if it isn't a lot, but considering the odds, I'm gonna give them the pass here. I'll give Ninja a better argument later, but Cutter, honestly, I think is good enough in one player, 100%, that we can allow it to not be the worst. It is genuinely one of the few abilities that actually has more than one use in the run, both being good as a dash attack and as a boss killer. Not the best, but it's good enough. You see it in a few different instances. Kinda Cutter's a sleeper hit of an ability, if I'm being perfectly honest. Lastly, we have the True Arena. I love Kirby boss speedruns, and... Oh, right, yeah, we went over this already. No biases. Please be there for me when I need the emotional healing, you guys, please. What's especially nice about the True Arena is that we actually have concrete numbers on which abilities are the fastest. I like to go for the sum of best times rather than the fastest completed runs. If you don't know the difference, I got you, no worries. The former is a combination of the best documented times against every individual boss, while the latter is an actual, unedited, completed run that only factors in the times from that run. Both are very good metrics to use, but using the sum of best gets us a more universal answer. Just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it's impossible. Let's reach for our dreams together with the power of knowledge together. Why did I say together so many times? Using these metrics, we can knock some abilities out right away. For now, I'm just gonna use the top 5, even though beyond the top 5 is still a good metric to use, but just for now, we can knock out Hammer and Meta Knight again, but also Ninja, Ice, and Fighter. I told you we get a better excuse for Ninja, okay? As for Ice and Fighter, we'll start with Ice. The dash attack is just so good. Well, okay, let me correct myself. The aerial dash attack. Ice gotta be fancy like that. Yeah, have you ever seen this? If you're looking at the footage now, you can see it. It's insane. And then the bosses just go, oh yeah, we're gonna drop a star. Whoops, I littered by mistake. I'm not gonna get punished for it. I can be evil. And then Kirby uses the ice command grab and it does like a quarter of their health or something. It's so Ice is stupid. It's so good. As for Fighter, the one that you don't actually see in single-player Hundo, which is also the reason why we give Fighter the pass since it has True Arena going for it. Just spam Hadouken, 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 Hadouken. It doesn't sound like much, but when you see Fighter in action, wow, it's really just that simple, huh? So what started as a relatively large pool of abilities is now down to 10. We've got Leaf, Whip, Water, Spear, Beam, Bomb, Needle, Spark, Stone, and Sorry to go figure. Of these, which is the absolute worst? Well, if nothing else, I'd like to think that I'm an unpredictable entertainer. So the first one that we're gonna knock out of here, genuinely, no jokes, is gonna be Sword. Yeah, sure, I rag on it all the time, and it's not amazing or anything, but it's the True Arena that really saves it. It isn't master class, don't get me wrong, but it's better than a good chunk of the abilities that are already in the clear that don't have to worry about being the worst, and it does so with such crazy simplicity. It really is just a spin attack that Sword needs, but no, unironically, genuinely, this is really good at killing bosses that it can hit. If it can't actually hit a boss with this, its time is like bottom 2, but whatever. My point is, Sword is good, I'm acting nice to it, don't get used to this. My mercy only extends so far. While we're knocking out abilities because of the True Arena, let's knock out all of the quote-unquote good abilities, why not? All of Whip, Leaf, Water, Spear, and Bomb have times that range from good enough to very good, which would make it feel kinda wrong to label them as the absolute worst. Water is also used a fair amount during Raise and Ruins in one-player Hundo, something that I wanted to mention earlier, but kinda didn't. I did the same thing for Cutter by mistake as well. Oopsie doops. And while finally, its True Arena time isn't that great, I can at least say that Beam has a much better time than the other abilities that we have left over, plus it is used in single-player Hundo once or twice, so it lands it safely away from the title of Worst Ability. With that leaves us with our finalists, Spark, Stone, and Needle. And of these three, I think we have a clear winner, at least in terms of I'm better than the rest. For one-player Hundo alone, Stone being able to pound stakes gives it so much utility compared to anything Needle or Spark can do. It also has a better overall True Arena time by a pretty wide margin, although that doesn't amount to much. It's still pretty bad. I would maybe argue that these three are the only abilities that I wouldn't call very good in Return to Dreamland, but Stone, I think you could convince me that it's actually good and that I'm just wrong on this. It's worth a shot. I don't think it's that good, but you know what? My mercy only extends so far. Needle and Spark, though. Oh boy. Okay, yeah, they're pretty bad. They're definitely the bottom two. I think there is a gigantic drop-off between the rest, Stone, and Needle and Spark. The problem with these two abilities is that they don't really do much of anything. Fun little fact here, Needle and Spark, other than High Jump, have the bottom 2 times for the True Arena. They're not impressive. And of course, High Jump may have the worst time. I already told you that it sees use, a good use, in 2-player Hundo, 2-player plus Hundo. This should go without saying, but for 2-player Hundo, neither of them are seen at all. Nobody's giving them a second thought. And for 1-player Hundo, they are both used for a good 5 seconds. You use Needle's dash attack to save some time through some obstacles, and you use Spark's vertical Zappy! That's Yunaka from Fire Emblem Engage. I love her attack in order to break some bomb blocks and get an energy sphere, which of course you would need for 100%. Now, both of these are very interesting points of comparison, so I'm gonna go into a little bit of detail with them. Starting with the True Arena, of course, they're both pretty bad, but surprisingly, they both have some fights that they're actually decent in. The big problem is that there are other fights that are really bad, but if we're looking at highs, then I would probably put them above the likes of, say, Tornado and, heck, even Stone. What makes this such an interesting comparison, though, is that Needle has the faster overall time. Spark is second from the bottom, Needle is third from the bottom. However, if you're looking at fights directly in which Needle is better or worse than Spark, Spark actually has more fights that it's good in compared to Needle. The problem is that the fights that Spark is bad in, it's really, really bad. So which one would you argue is better here? The one that is overall technically better, or the one that has more impressive times but is just weighed down by some worse times? This is definitely a discussion that I think is worth having, but for the sake of the video, I'm gonna cut a lot of the fluff and just say that I think Needle is better here because its time overall is better. Yeah, sure, Spark having some better times is impressive, which is hilarious to say considering this is the second worst ability for the True Arena to begin with, but exactly. It's the second worst ability for the True Arena, Needle is the third. I'm just talking numbers here, Needle is better. For a single-player hundo, on the other hand, this is a much more complicated discussion. See, Needle's dash attack does save good time once, but Spark being used for an energy sphere means that if you don't bring Spark and you miss that energy sphere, you need to replay the entire level again, which in theory means that Spark saves you way more time than Needle would. That being said, though, there are ways to clear this bomb block puzzle, even without using multiplayer. You don't need Meta Knight or Bandanity or whatever for this. You can use other abilities. I've done this with Whip, for example. So while Spark's valuable time save is replaceable, Needle's isn't really. I mean, it's not a super big time save. It's a couple seconds at most, but a couple of seconds adds up really fast in a speedrun, even one that's over 2 hours, like single-player hundo. So at the end of the day, which one do you value more? It's just like the True Arena thing we were talking about before. Do you value a time save that is irreplaceable? Or do you value a time save that is replaceable, but is not only easiest done with the ability in question, but also saves more time than you would otherwise lose if you messed up? To answer this question, I'm gonna look at Spark a little bit and ask the question, why don't you use another ability instead? And the simple answer is, Spark is just the most optimal ability that you're gonna get here. Yeah, big surprise, you use Spark because it's optimal, shock. I do very much value Needle's time save, and this is very close, but for this argument, I'm gonna give the win to Spark. So it seems we've reached an impasse. Needle is better for boss rushes, Spark is, ever so slightly, better for 100% single player. How can we draw a conclusion from this? Easy answer! You may have noticed that I have completely failed to talk about the ability solos. I've mostly avoided them up until now because, I'll just be perfectly honest, I don't really need to talk about them. But now that we're comparing Needle and Spark, let's look to see what their times are. Needle's final time is 2:14:39, that's what I got with it, and Spark's is 2:14:54. That's like barely any difference at all. That's hardly concisive evidence, is what I would say. However, what you might need to know is that these are runs that I've only done once. I also hardly call myself a master to begin with of Return to Dreamland speedrunning. I am just a cute puppy after all. Doggos aren't very much known to be good at speedrunning, you know? But what I can say is that, even though I haven't specifically used my speedrun timer metrics as a metric, I have gone back and just casually done runs with both of these abilities. For Spark, I haven't actually gotten under a 2:14 yet. I mean, obviously, I've gotten much closer to 2:14 than this. This was effectively a 2:15. I just got a little lucky towards the end. But with Needle, I was actually able to get the time under 2:10. Needle is a bit more of a complicated ability, but it has a lot of randomly cool tech, like a dash attack that keeps your momentum when you use it off a ledge. If you cancel it with the normal attack, really cool stuff, that allows it to move faster than an ability like Spark. Also, as we talked about before, it is better for beating bosses than Spark is, which saves not that much time, but it saves enough. Needle's also harder to beat bosses with than Spark, so that's technically a further time loss if I mess up, compared to Spark, which is very easy, albeit ineffective. Basically, what I'm saying is that Needle has a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to improve. Whereas Spark, it's a bit too basic to really improve in many areas at all. So with that, I think we found our answer. It was actually not very close because the one area that Spark wins out in isn't really all that impressive, whereas the two areas a Needle wins out in are far more impressive. I honestly think Needle is not that bad of an ability if we're talking about it. I maybe even would consider it better than Stone, but you're going to have to get back to me on that one, just because of what Stone can do in single-player hundo, but now we're getting distracted. Spark is the worst ability in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. That's what you came here for. There's your answer, everybody. Now, of course, with that being said, am I saying that you're wrong for using Spark? that using Spark makes you a bad person, that you need to reconsider your life's decisions and go on a long, life-changing journey in order to make up for the pure cardinal sin that you use Spark in a Kirby game? No, why would I ever say that? You use whatever abilities that you want to use. You have fun playing the single-player game the way that you want to enjoy. Unless you're playing with friends, in which case, you enjoy that multiplayer game in a way that you want to enjoy it. It's like I said at the start, this was just a fun little exercise to see if we could find what the worst ability in the game is using these specific metrics that I think are good factors to find out which ability is the worst. And the answer turned out to be Spark. I know not everybody is going to agree with me in the comments, even though I did a pretty decent amount of research into this one. But hey, you do what you like. I'm still going with Spark. I don't think there's any ability that's worse. Although, funnily enough, back in the GameFAQs forum days, everybody was talking about why Spark was the best ability because all you had to do was shake the Wii remote in order to use it. You didn't actually have to engage with the game at all, unlike every other ability, which is interesting looking back on. So interesting, in fact, that I actually used to agree. I even have a Spark Spotlight on my channel that is very old, that I even say in it that, yeah, it's bad for speedrunning, but it's still good because of that, which, wow, it's bad, but it's good because I said so. Like, who am I kidding? Anyways, I have been Klaire. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry if you like Spark. I'm not sorry if you love Parasol. That ability is amazing. And until I see you all again, bye-bye!